Alright, let's try that again. So, this is my NeoFetch. You don't really need to know about that. But this is Artix, right? And what had happened was I was going to try Dev1, and I figured out the issue I was having was because I wiped my drive trying to install Dev1 and then had some issues with partitioning, I decided to go back into Windows and just use Rufus. And when you use Rufus, you need to enable DD mode for most ISOs for some reason, like if you're using a Linux ISO. And if you don't, I get like an error when I try to boot that says grub, bad file system, and Artix did the same thing. So I ended up figuring that out and needed to use DD mode. And I think I tried GPT instead of MBR, which it defaults to for some reason. I don't understand that either. But after all that, I got into the Artix installer and everything was cool. Except I tried to use XFS as a file system, and currently it's bugged where if you use XFS as a file system, it makes two partitions, 512 megabyte EFI partition, and everything else is root. And if you use like a race disk, and what'll happen though is it will try to it'll try to make the file system for EFI XFS as well, and grub will say unknown file system because it needs to be fat. But if you use X4, it works fine, So I probably need to go file a bug report on that. I don't know. So I was going to use OpenRC or run it because that's what I've been used to on Void and Gentoo. But somebody else said S6 has daemon supervision, so you should try that. And it really didn't matter to me because I know that every init system except systemd will do pretty much what I want it to as long as I can learn it. Because the main problems I've had with systemd are just long shutdown times, which is just completely unacceptable. I mean, that's annoying. But the other one was I've got this audio glitch where I'll get like a chirp coming out of my speakers every now and then, and I've actually narrowed down the bug to only distributions with systemd on it. It doesn't happen with Void, it doesn't happen with the Gentoo, and so far it hasn't happened in Artix, but that may change. So for some reason systemd does something that like messes with audio, because, and this actually could also be it's not Pipewire because this is not using Pipewire. I am using Pulse. So, and I know that I've had this issue with GNOME using Pipewire on Dev1, or not Dev1, Debian. And Debian is the reason I'm here right now because I tried systemd for one day and I was like, oh yeah, now I remember why I don't use this. So anyways, now I'm using S6 and I don't know shit about it. I mean, this shit's complicated. I'm not gonna lie to you, this is the most complicated init system I've ever used. And hopefully, what's cool about Artix though is I installed Sane, right, for my scanner, and it pulled the S6 package automatically from the Artix repos, and it recompiled the database and enabled the service on boot, so I don't have to mess with anything. It's really cool. Unlike Void, where if you install a service with Run It, the first thing you need to do is symlink it, and then it will start on boot. It's really simple. But on Artix, it just does everything for you, which is cool. I really like that. Hopefully that happens on other init systems too. I don't know, I've only used S6, but I think that's really cool. And each package, this is why I'm not using the Arch or Arch repos or the AUR. I have one package from the AUR and I compiled it using base devil, where it's just my printer driver for a brother printer, and I was wondering why cups didn't detect it, but it turns out I needed system config printer, which is just a graphical front end for cups, and once I did that, everything worked fine. If you can do it headless, that's good for you, but I can't do it. So this is where I got confused though during the install, was lswitch assigns the labels to the partition, which helps referring to them later through dis by label. That threw me for a loop because I've never had to do that before. I always just use my drive by the number, and it helps me know that the drive I'm working on is the drive I'm working on. But because I used this lswitch during the install, I had to use this command because SDC1 didn't work anymore. So I got really confused and I said fuck it, but this guy said, oh, why are you doing a manual install? They have an installer. So I did that, and that's where I had the problem with XFS. So because I'm not using the Arch repo or the AUR, what I am using is Flatpak for everything. Now that's also going to sound really stupid. Why would you have access to the AUR and Arch repos and just use Flatpak? And the reason why is because I don't find the Arch repos super stable, I don't want them on my system, and they have systemd dependencies. that's a problem. So I'm trying to stick to the Artix repos as much as possible and just use things from there or as a Flatpak, and that is where I am right now. I actually should have installed OBS as a Flatpak because it's got more features, but I just used the native package because why not? So what's going to happen though is, this is just kind of a first impressions of what I've been going through. And because I used everything as a Flatpak, one of the first things I noticed was I needed to open external links in case I needed to open Firefox as my browser. And what I needed was, I learned this from Void 2, was XGG Desktop Portal GTK for XFCE. And what that does is it allows you to use Desktop Portal from Flatpak applications. So if you like open, let's say you have Spotify installed or a Steam game and Steam over a Flatpak, that's why I'm using Steam as a Flatpak, is I didn't want the Arch repos. Artix advertises that they have Steam, but for some reason it's not in their repo. You have to enable the Arch repos, and you also need multilib. So I was like, I don't want to enable multilib. I'll just use it as a Flatpak and everything should be fine. And it was. I was up in gaming and like the night that I had it installed, I downloaded the game and started playing it, and everything was cool. No crashes yet. That's really cool. But I'm not expecting that to last. I am, however, I did learn from Void that I need to stop fucking around with system files because that really messed me up. So I'm hoping that this remains somewhat stable as long as I'm not using the Arch repositories or the AUR. I have one package from the AUR and it's just my printer driver. So far everything's good. I think I need to learn more about S6 before I recommend it to anybody, but the way Artix uses it is actually really nice. And when you're picking an init system, like, don't worry too much about it. That's kind of a subject of a different video I want to make about how am I supposed to recommend Linux to people when I'm using the stupid shit. Like, I can't get on board with Wayland or systemd. That's the way things are going. How am I going to tell somebody else to use Linux and then they'll be like, hey, why does it take like 5 minutes to shut down? And they'll be like, oh yeah, well, now you're getting into the init wars, and yeah. So welcome to Linux, buddy. But if I were much less of a technical user and I was okay with having systemd on my computer and I was okay with its quirks, yeah, I could probably recommend Linux more. But when I'm like, oh yeah, I use a systemd list distribution and I don't use Wayland, I use this ancient fucking desktop environment, and I have to do all of this bullshit to get up and running, they're gonna be like, what the fuck, why would I want to use that? And it's hard to tell them, like, it's just fucking better. It works better than having everything out of the box. I hate to say it, but that's kind of how this works. So anyways, so far Artix is pretty cool. So I've made this video before, don't use Arch, right? And this is kind of my attempt to use Arch. I'm still probably going to hold that you shouldn't use Arch, but it turns out a lot of my problems with Arch actually have to do with systemd rather than Arch itself. I like its package manager. I like its repositories. I don't mind being on rolling release, you know? But it's kind of hard to say, you know, that can I recommend Arch if it's Artix? And that is the question I'm looking to answer now. And the answer may be yes, maybe. I mean, I recommend Void, and it's actually slightly more complicated than I'm finding S6 to be. As far as, like, you know, the distribution handling services and stuff, Void comes way more minimal. Like, you see I've got 853 packages, I barely installed anything. Void came with 500, and by the time I was all set up, I had about 1,000 packages, but I also had a lot more stuff installed. There's some stuff I'm not going to be installing on here. So, God willing, this is going to be pretty rock solid, but that's kind of my challenge I'm going to undertake, is I'm going to use Artix and only use their repositories as well as, like, Flatpak and compiling things. I'm going to try to avoid the Arch repositories as much as possible, and we'll see how long it lasts. So hopefully I've learned enough from Void Linux to make better educated decisions on, like, what software goes on my computer. and that should be it, you know. Anyways, it's a new year, new distribution, so I'll come back to you with more on this, but for now I think I gotta file a bug report. Alright, see ya.